Well, go ahead. Go ahead, get your coffee. I got a video I got to show first. Go ahead. Go ahead, Allie. While you guys are getting your coffee, this will be perfect.
You know, if you were to follow busy doctors who makes you take around the call, you would find yourself having a mighty busy time keeping up with it. Time out for many medicine usually means just long enough to enjoy a cigarette. And because they know what a pleasure it is to smoke a mild, good-tasting cigarette, they're convinced that they're off the brand and cheap. In a repeated national survey, doctors in all branches of medicine, doctors in all parts of the country were asked, what cigarette do you smoke, doctors? Once again, the brand name most was Camel. Yes, according to this repeated nationwide survey, more doctors smoke Camel than any other cigarette. Why not change to Camel for the next 30 days and see what a difference it makes in your smoking enjoyment? See how Camels agree with your approach. See how mild and good tasting a cigarette can be.
What was the original? Oh, go ahead.
I used to smoke.
Yeah, I really enjoyed smoking.
And it just reminds me because I'm like, I never felt addicted to it, but I really enjoyed it. Like sitting there with a cup of coffee, or as soon as you get into your car.
I used to smoke too, Lindley, and I would agree with that. Yes, I did. Yeah, Doc, you were a doctor, right? What was your favorite brand?
I never.
Yeah, right, whatever.
I bought it. My dad would send me to Fingers.
Pall Mall. All right. That's funny. So it's interesting. What is this called? What was that? Advertisement, commercial, right? Do you know what the original word for advertising was when these originally came out? It wasn't called advertising until after the 50s. It was called something else. What was it called? The original word for advertising. Nobody knows? Propaganda. You got it? Is propaganda good or bad? It depends on how you use it. It depends on how you use it, right? So what is propaganda? I have a definition. Propaganda is this: the spreading of ideas, information, or rumor for the purpose of helping or injuring an institution, a cause, or a person. Ideas, facts, allegations spread deliberately to further one's cause or to damage an opposing cause. So propaganda is just the spreading of ideas that one deems to be correct. For what purpose? To buy in, to believe, and not to just believe, then to do what? To act, right? The idea of propaganda is to get you to believe what I want you to believe so that you will now do it. Advertising? Yep. We have been seeing this a lot lately, right? Propaganda is everywhere, especially in your mailbox. In your mailbox, what do you get? You get tons of propaganda. You know, it's like overwhelming. And what is the whole point? To get you to believe what the propaganda tells you so that you will what? Vote. So that you will go vote. So you see propaganda in your mailbox. You see it nationally, globally. For years, you've had these debates where people are trying to spread their ideas of socialism, communism, capitalism, free market society. The battle of ideas is just propaganda. It's everywhere. But you have the responsibility to choose what to believe. And unfortunately, most people don't learn. They don't seek out truth. They don't try to figure out what is the truth. They just follow. They just do what everybody else is doing because their friends tell them to do this, or their neighbor or their family says, well, this is who you should vote for, or this is what you should do, or this is where you should go, or this is what you should believe. Or maybe worse, maybe it's what the algorithm feeds you to believe. And just whatever comes through, and that's all that you see, then that's all that you believe. Is propaganda in itself good or bad? It just depends on how it's being used. So let's back up a minute and talk about Scripture. What are the types of literature that is found in the Bible? Is there only one style of literature in the Bible? What's in the Bible? Give me one. Apocalyptic? Poetry? History? What? Yeah, Lamentations, yeah. But what type of poetry is Lamentations? That's got to be a literature, right? There's history, there's wisdom, law. There's, somebody said narrative, but there's also parables, myth. There's letters that have been written to somebody else. Right? There's all kinds of literature that is found in the Scriptures. Right? And when you read the Bible, you have to take into account what type of literature are you reading. Too often we just open the book and just take it for granted and read something without thinking in depth, what is this document that I'm reading? What is it written to? Who is it written for? What is it written about? We just open it up and we read it. And so what are the 4 laws that I've given of understanding the Bible? I've given you 4 laws over the almost 18 years that we've been here. Close. It's a letter, but it doesn't have a P in it. Chill, right? Easiest way. Bobby came up with this. Easy way to remember it. Chill. Culture, context, history, language, right? We have to look at these things if we truly want to understand what it is that we're reading, so that we don't just go along with what somebody says. You know, there's so many people who love to quote the Bible and quote the Scriptures, but I struggle with that. Why? Why do I personally struggle with it? I've said this many times. Because that is not true. It's pulled so many times. I get frustrated because people pull verses out of context and then they say, like, this is what God says. That's not what it actually says in the context of something. So culture, context, history, language. If we start with Genesis 1, well, we've been in Genesis 1 for several weeks now. Genesis 1 and 2 is where we're going to be at. I'm just going to look at a few verses. But for Genesis 1 and the beginning of 2, what type of literature is Genesis 1 and 2? Just those 2 chapters. Poetry, yes. Who's the poetry for? Israelites. What type of Israelites? Give me a little bit more context of who these people are, not just because they're not Israelites yet. They are Israel, but they don't live in a place yet. Who are they? Escaped? Rescued? Delivered? They didn't like cut through the barbed wire themselves, right? There was something powerful that happened that rescued them from what? Slavery. Very good. And so here we have this poetic document that's given to these people who have been beaten down all of their lives. They've been in slavery all in lives. They've been told a story all in lives of who they are and what they are to believe about themselves. They've been given their own propaganda of who they are and what to believe and how they are supposed to live. The second group of people that this is for, and this is outside the scope, is anybody that's reading that now can also read this document and who it was written to. So we get to partake in just reading the outside. It wasn't written to us, but we get to witness who it was written to. Culture. What did these slaves learn growing up? I just said it. I gave you the answer already. What was the propaganda that they were told over and over and over? You're nothing. You're useless. The gods don't care about you. Many gods, in fact. They had several gods in Egypt who favored their captors, who created the world, that man was created from tears. That's how man was created. These tears that fell and dropped on the ground, and the gods cried, and then man was created from these tears. And here the God who rescues them gives them a new creation story, something different. Some similarities, but then some things that are drastically different, where man specifically is created in a different way. History. Does Genesis have to be literal to be true? We've said over and over, it doesn't have to be, right? Because is poetry literal? But is there truth in poetry? Absolutely. There's all kinds of truths that you can pull out of poetry that affect your life. So Genesis 1 doesn't have to be a scientific, literal document. Doesn't mean that it's false if you call it poetry and not literal. The truth is found in the poetry. But it doesn't have to be literal, because in a literal sense, if we were to just look at it, how old is humanity? How old is the earth if we look at it just literal? What? 6,000 years, right? Over and over. People that, if you look at it from a literal document, it's the earth is only 6,000 years old, and mankind is only 6,000 years old. And I'm sure Allie's in the back saying, like, that's crazy. You can't talk like that. That's heresy. You know, as the archaeologist Indiana Jonette back there would tell you.
Indiana Jones isn't even technically an archaeologist.
See, there you go, right? Indiana Jones is not technically an archaeologist. He's just a teacher. He's a professor. That's it. But Allie would probably tell you, look, human remains have been found and dated for that people were living for at least 50 to 230,000 years ago. Not just that, they found discoveries in caves like worship, cave drawings. They found farming that is old as 6,000 years ago. So how can the Bible claim that Adam and Eve were born or the first people if there's life or evidence that there's people that existed before them? How is that possible? Or does the Bible actually say that? One of the things that I went off on a tangent this week, and I wanted to share this, maybe because this is just selfishly, but as I was thinking about this, in the Talmud, these rabbis that are hundreds of years old from today, you know, in the 11th and 12th century, 8th century, rabbis were looking at this text for a long time before archaeology had come about, before any remains had come about, before any of these discoveries had come about. They were just purely looking at the text. And they said, according to their sources, multiple sources in the Talmud, it said that God created 974 generations before Adam. Multiple places the Talmud alludes to this. I think I got a couple of them up here. It says 974 generations were to have been created before the creation of the world, but they were snatched away. God then planted a few of them in each subsequent generation, and they are the brazen, arrogant ones of that generation. Other sources are more explicit. It said, God said to Israel, my son, I am the one who sat for 974 generations before the world was created. And then it also says, I created 1,000 generations, and how many of them were erased? 974 was the reason. 974 were erased because in Psalms it says, a promise he gave for 1,000 generations. And what was that promise? The Torah. In other words, before their science, before archaeology, before any of this stuff, the rabbis deduced that Moses had lived 26 generations after Adam and Eve. But until that point, when Moses was receiving this, he was at the 1,000th generation. Now, the technical side of how the rabbis came about this is what's called gematria. We've talked about that before. How numbers, how all of these letters that are in the Bible are actually numbers. And they put these numbers together and they followed the numbers, kind of like you follow the money, right? They followed the numbers to figure out all of this stuff to realize that this is how old this world could be. The study of numbers and letters and subsequent numbers. Now, regardless of how they came up with it, it doesn't always make sense to me because there's all of these technical things. But what I found was fascinating is why they had to do it. And if Walt was in here, he would tell you why, because he loves to bring this up. right? When we look at the scriptures, we look at Genesis, there's some flaws in it. There's some things that just don't make sense. If Adam and Eve is the first two people on the earth, who do Adam and Eve bear after when they have children? Who are they? Cain and Abel. Cain does what to Abel? Kills Abel. God confronts him and then has sympathy for him. And what does he do? He marks him and sends him away. Why does he mark him? What people? What people? If they're the only four people on the earth, then what is there to fear? Why does he need to mark him? Why does he need to protect him? The rabbis struggled with this, and that's why they dug and dug and dug into the text to figure out, how is this possible? Were they the only two people on the earth? They say no. And also, if you get to Genesis 4, it talks about the idea that there was Nephilim, or titans, on the earth. Well, who are the Nephilim? Where did they come from? Where did these giants come from? And if you look at archaeology, they found giants. They found hobbits, they found there's all kinds of different archaeological evidence that there's different things. So where did the Nephilim come from if it started with Adam and Eve? So it's fascinating how the rabbis were able to search the text, not just look at it literally, but to search the text to find answers that we now have proof in science is showing to be true. Once again, the story, the poetry doesn't have to be literal for it to be true, and to have truths in it. Finally, we get to language. Somebody read Genesis 1:26 and 27 for me, please. Who's got me?
Thank God for the listening and our image of our lives. Let us have dominion over the fish of the sea, and the birds of the heaven, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. The image of God he created. Male and female he created.
Excellent. So many things in this passage, so many words that we could look up and go through, so much stuff in here that we might have to come back over the next few weeks to just try to absorb. But two things that I wanted to point out. God created them male and female. Once again, over and over and over, we talked about 2 weeks ago, this idea that God creates distinctions. There's distinctions between these things. And here he finalized it with the distinction between man and woman. And then he says, man. The word for man is actually Adam. In Hebrew, it doesn't say man, it says Adam. And then Adam was created from Adamah. What's Adamah? Dirt. Adam is the first dirt man, literally created from the dust, which is very different from these. Remember, going back to the beginning, who are these people? What did the story that they believed? Where did they come from? What did the gods in Egypt tell them how they were created? Tears. These tears fell on the earth and then they plopped up. Here, this text now says, you were created specifically from the dirt, which is why in Proverbs it says, you were born from the dirt and you will go back to the dirt. We were created from this dirt. This dirt man is also Adam. He is who we were created from. And in this image that we were created from, not just randomly. It wasn't just like this dirt spread up and it was something new and it was different. You were created specifically in the image of something else. It is not random. It is not by chance. It is not just this mistake. You were created specifically in the image of God. And what that means, we'll talk about next week. But one more thing. It doesn't just say that we were created in his image. Verse 2:7, please. Chapter 2, verse 7. Rustin, really loud.
And the Lord God formed the man of dust from the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living creature.
This dirt man this dust man, was created. Unlike the Egyptians, unlike the tears, this man was created and given life by how? What gave him life? Not just the forming of the dirt, but what? The breath of God, it says, was breathed into man. And it's not just this breath of life, it's also translated as the soul of life, the mishmat chayim. This breath of life is what distinguishes us from all of other creation. Everything else was created by God and formed. This is the only creation of all of God's creation where he blows the soul of life into each man and woman. The breath of life into each of us. We were given breath from God. That's what gives us life. And it's through this breath that it says that he created living beings, this nefesh hayah, which I spoke on many years ago, but I maybe haven't been recently. But this idea, the rabbi said, nefesh hayah means life, but it can also be speaking. It's not just living being, but the rabbis say that it can also be translated as a speaking being, which is different from all of other creation, because of all of other creation, we are the only ones who have the ability that we've received breath from life and we can actually speak with the one who created this life. Of all of creation, all the animals, all the plants, all the mountains, all the sea, all the rain, all the water, of all the stuff, we are the only ones who can have the capacity to talk with the one who created everything. Just us. We are the only ones. In other words, we, in all of creation, have this ability, who gives us breath, who gives us life, to connect with the Creator. Why is that important? A group of people who have just been rescued, who have witnessed something, are now in the desert. If you've ever been in the desert before, anybody been in the desert? I grew up in the desert. It's barren. There's nothing but dirt, right? And you're thinking, this is where we came from. This is where we will die. If you've ever been in a desert, you know, life could end at any moment. And you could be wondering, what the hell am I doing out here? Why did God bring us out here? Why did this Creator bring us all the way out here just so we can die? I mean, we see that. That's what they start saying to each other. You bring yourself out there and you feel like you're the only one. You feel like this is where it's all going to end. There's nothing left. There's no hope. There's no life. Now what? Everything is crumbling in around me and everything is about to fail. And here I am. I'm going to die in this desert. And then they're given a story, a poem, to tell them, you are not an accident. In fact, I created you very specifically for a reason and a purpose. And I didn't just create you with a reason or purpose. I created you in such a way that you can actually connect with me. In the most dire of circumstances, in the worst places environment, in the worst environment where you think there's no hope left, I give you a story that says, you can talk to me. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like there was no hope? Where everything was going wrong around you? Where everything was about to fail? Or everything, there was nothing that you could actually do? And how often do we need that reminder that you can talk to me? That I hear you. That I love you. And I'm with you. Because I have a greater plan and a purpose for you. because I created you this way. As I looked through this study, it weighed on me because I feel like so many of us in this parish, in this place, me included, are going through so much stuff. And we wonder, what is going to happen next? And I needed to hear, just talk to me first. It doesn't matter what happens next. What matters is that, are you connected to me? Do I connect with God? Do I share my heart and my feelings and my fears with him? Because that's what he wants. Because that's what he gave to the people right here. A story, a poem to say, I am listening to you. And I have a purpose for you. So next week we'll talk more about that purpose. But I wanted to end there. For some reason, Aaron, I'm going to ask you to pray. I don't know why, but would you pray us out?
Father, thank you for the chance to get here today. We miss people that aren't here. Just somehow we just take a deep breath and say it's good to sing together. It's good to read a few verses from your word and ponder. And even if we look at this book sometimes as oral history, we're reminded just to step back and realize we weren't there. We asked bigger questions and we see that you have deep meanings throughout the book, throughout our story, throughout our life for us. So thank you. There are some lingering questions though outside this place, whether it's our family or our parish or the world. People are hurting. So thank you for the words that we sang and the reality. Just that example we gave here at the name that you picked us. You spoke life